摆事实看真假，欢迎来到中外新闻找不同。今天的重磅新闻是康明凯之妻露面提要求，释放孟晚舟。新闻是由环球网发布，被多家媒体转载。全文表述的内容更多的是康明凯妻子在无法与康明凯取得联系的时的无奈以及绝望。他一直以来没有公开露面，但一直试图解救康明凯。时至今日，距离他们上一次与康明凯取得联系已经是数月了。他希望加拿大司法部采取任何方法，只要能解救康明凯。这里我把原文进行了逐字逐句的翻译，对翻译感兴趣的朋友可以点击我视频下方的链接。同时，环球时报的新闻中也提到了加拿大广播公司22日对康明凯妻子的采访。下面我们来看视频翻译。上视频。
Michael Kovrig was on leave as a diplomat and working full-time with the International Crisis Group on de-escalating global conflicts when in December of 2018 he was detained in China on suspicion of endangering national security. Businessman Michael Spavor was also detained, same accusation. The two Michaels had met in China, but they weren't friends. They were, though, about to be inextricably linked to each other and to Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of Huawei, arrested by Canadian authorities just days earlier on a request from the United States. The men held in retaliation for her detention. That was and still is the presumption of many. It's happened before.
We have continued to express our disappointment with the Chinese decision, with the Chinese detention of these two Canadians. We will continue to advocate for their release, for their return to Canada.
Calls for their release have come from around the globe, but one person fighting perhaps harder than anyone in the world for their freedom has stayed out of the headlines. She is Veena Najibullah, Kovrig's wife. They separated before he was detained, but she is, as she says, his person. She's also a geopolitical expert with nearly 2 decades worth of experience with the UN and civil society groups. She's been banging down the doors of power for every one of the last 560 days. And while the men have now been charged, she's not finished fighting. She is, though, finished with being silent. We met today to talk about saving Michael, saving both Michaels. So, Veena, I know the pandemic is the least of your concerns, but we can't ignore it, so I'm sorry we have to be this far apart.
It's okay, I understand.
Appreciate
Better be safe.
You've been quiet for the entire time of his detention. Why did you decide to talk now? What have you been weighing?
As Michael's family, we have spent the last 560 days working closely with the government, with all stakeholders, and focusing on private diplomacy, on behind-the-scenes efforts to secure Michael's freedom. And after 560 days of patiently waiting and hoping, and a ton of moments of, okay, maybe something will happen, maybe something has happened, we made a decision that it's time for us to speak.
Have you been worried, though, that speaking would either affect him or maybe affect your relationship with the government?
Absolutely. Since day one, our main concern has been do no harm. Make sure Michael's safety and well-being is number one in our minds. And do whatever we can to bring him home. I mean, and we've been trusting the government. We've been working very closely with the government, and that is one of the reasons why until now we have remained quiet and giving that every chance we could.
So China says they were spying. Is it at all possible it's true?
No. No. I mean...
How do you know?
Because these accusations are groundless, they're baseless, their detention was arbitrary since day one. That is what our government and that's what many other governments around the world have clearly stated. There is no doubt why this happened. Even Chinese officials in various elaborate ways have made it clear that there is a link between what took place on December 1, 2018 with the arrest of Meng Wanzhou and the subsequent detention of the two Michaels.
So you used the word arbitrary.
Yes.
China's heard that word. China said last night, a Chinese official, that there's no such thing as arbitrary detention in China.
They have been making that point all along, that this is following their own process. They have an independent judiciary and so forth. The facts remain. And like I said, there have been a number of occasions where that has been made clear to Canadians, that Canada needs to untie the knot. Canada needs to solve this problem, and the other elements will go back to the way they were.
Can you tell me about Michael?
Sure. Well, I've known Michael for almost 20 years. We met in grad school. We studied together. He and I have been married for many, many years. He's my best friend. He's my family. So I'm not objective, but I would say that he's a great man. He wants to make the world a better place. And that's why, unfortunately, he is in this situation. That's why he was in China.
And he proposed to you at the UN.
That's right. Yes. It was a UN proposal, a Canadian UN proposal. At the time, he was with the Canadian mission to the United Nations. He was working there. I mean, we're still legally married, but we're separated. And regardless of our romantic status, he is a very important person in my life. He's my family. And I have been doing everything I can for the last 560 days to secure his freedom.
And to him, who are you?
I am his person, like he's my person. We have each other's back, and he is in a fight for his life. And I am in his corner, just like everybody else in his family. When we were both at the United Nations, and I spent a lot of time in war zones because of my work, he would always say, no matter where you are, if something bad happens, I will be there and I'll get you out. I have your back.
And so, for Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor, she's put everything else in her life on hold. These just a sample of the meticulous notes and diaries she's kept of meetings in Washington and Ottawa, endless phone calls and to-do lists for securing their freedom, and the worries about how they are, especially her Michael. How's Michael managing?
Well, it's hard for us to know. The last consular visit was on January 14th. Basically, he has been confined to a single cell for this entire time. He has not gone outside. He has not seen a tree or had fresh air to breathe for 560 days. He says that it really weighs on the soul when you can't see more than 10 feet in any direction. He has not been able to see more than 10 feet in any direction. His life, as he calls it, is very monastic, very sparse. For the first 6 months, he was in solitary confinement, which means completely isolated, interrogated for many, many hours. Since then, the situation has changed. He does have cellmates, so there is a bit of human interaction, and that has meant a lot for his psychological health.
Only once in 560 days has Veena heard his voice. It was in March, or as the family counts time, day 460. So let's talk about that phone call. So once in 560 days, you've heard his voice.
Yes, it was the first time we heard his voice.
So what happened? How did that unfold?
We were sort of working on it and petitioning for it for many months, and then all of a sudden, sort of 48 hours before it happened, okay, it's going to happen. And 20 minutes beforehand, I got a call on my cell phone saying they will patch Michael through in a few minutes, and that's exactly what happened. It was meant to be a 15-minute phone call, and it was with Michael's father, his sister, and myself. It ended up being 16 minutes and 47 seconds. To be honest, it was probably the most sort of meaningful and impactful 16 minutes and 42 seconds of my life, because we got so much in. Like, Michael was incredible. He had no idea the call was happening, but the minute he heard my voice, he said, well, his question was, Veena, is that you? And I said, yes, and I'm here with your father and your sister, and he just, like, in a second realized what was happening and started to speak, and immediately, talked about how we're doing and how much he loves us and misses us and that he's okay, and was very worried about his dad, and I'm so grateful that that call took place.
When we come back,
help me feel less isolated. Let me share the love I have for you, and we'll get through this together. Love, Michael.
Letters from Michael Kovrig were a lifeline to his family, but those letters have stopped coming. Canadian Michael Kovrig's family may have only heard his voice once in 560 days of detention in a Chinese prison, but they do have a sense of how he's managing thanks to letters. Initially one a month, but even those have stopped now. The last letter received was in March. For Veena, Najibullah, they are treasures. No doubt they're poetry. Are you okay to read some of his letters?
Yes, sure. So this one actually was early. This was in July, right after his solitary ended. And he says, if there's one faint silver lining to this hell, it's this. Trauma carved caverns of psychological pain through my mind. As I strive to heal and recover, I find myself filling those gulfs with a love for you and for life that is vast, deep, and more profound and comforting than what I've ever experienced before. So as I sit here, tinnitus ringing in the silence, as I walk in circles, pollution clogging my nose, come sit with me and walk with me in spirit. Help me feel less isolated. Let me share the love I have for you, and we'll get through this together. Love, Michael.
There's more than heartache here. There's determination to get both men out. And part of Vina's work has been to lobby wherever she can and learn everything she can about the detention of Meng Wanzhou and Canada's options. So Vina, I know you've been following the case of Meng Wanzhou very carefully, including going to the court.
Yes,
and nobody knew who you were. You wandered right past all those cameras. Nobody knew who you were.
That's right.
What is the relationship between her right now and them?
As long as that situation is continuing in Vancouver, it is very difficult to imagine a way to secure Michael's freedom, to secure both our Michael and Michael Spauer's freedom.
Last night, China said that Canada is playing, the role of accomplice to the United States. When you hear that, what do you think?
I mean, that has been the Chinese position since day one. They have made it very clear that they view the arrest of Meng Wanzhou as a political act orchestrated by the United States, and that Canada went along with that. The language sort of varies between us being accomplices versus us being sort of just naive, but the theme has been consistent. She's taken for political reasons, she needs to be released, and Canada is paying the price for that decision.
So we know that Donald Trump said that he would bring up the matter, the case of the detention of the Canadians at every opportunity with China, but he signed multiple agreements with China since then. So do you have any sense from the White House of what they've actually been doing?
There's definitely been support in words from the United States. I don't know to what extent in private conversations or negotiations there has been any discussion of this matter. What I do know is that it's day 560, and our Michael and Michael Spauer are still in jail. They're continuing to suffer and pay the price for something that they had nothing to do with. They are pawns in this bigger geopolitical game, and it's time for us to take action. Words are no longer enough.
What do you want the Chinese authorities to hear from you?
You are holding an innocent man. Michael has done nothing to endanger China or Chinese people. Michael has devoted his professional career to building peace in the world, to building bridges between China and the rest of the world, to understanding China. He has great respect for the language and for the culture and for the people. Detaining an innocent man and inflicting so much suffering on him and his family does not in any way serve the interests of China. In fact, it does the opposite. It sends a chilling effect to all those people who are interested in building bridges with China, to all the people that are interested in a world that is more peaceful and just. This is unfair, this is unnecessary, and a great nation does not need to engage in hostage diplomacy or use people as pawns to prosecute its foreign policy. That is unnecessary, and I hope they will release him.